Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Just want to say thanks for subscribing to the channel. If you haven't subscribed yet, please consider doing so now. Just hit the little logo down in the corner and hit subscribe. It's free and very much appreciated. So this week on the channel, we're going to go ahead and install the Suntour Auron here. We've got the fork here, the Suntour Auron. We're going to install that on the Devinci Kobain hardtail. So it should be pretty straightforward. I did an install of a fork pretty early on in my YouTube career. One of my very first videos, I installed a fork on Mel's bike, and I didn't do a very good job. Learned a lot of things along the way, so this should hopefully go a lot smoother. So let's take a look at what we're gonna need to get the fork on the Kobain. Okay, so here's what we're gonna need to install this on the bike, I think. We basically have some spacers over here. I have some different spacers similar to what I had set up on the Roscoe. The stem, of course, we have the fun Crossfire stem here we're gonna put on the bike. We have our headset components. It's a Cane Creek headset that came on the Kobain, so that's pretty cool. We got the different pieces that go on the top here, and then the bottom bearings and the crown race. And the nice thing about this crown race that came with the headset, it's actually a split crown race, so we won't have to use any special tools to get that installed on the fork. We have, of course, we're going to need a star nut here for the fork, and I have this here setting tool, focuses on that, this setting tool which will allow me to set that correctly in the fork. What else do we got here? I got this here that I picked up on Amazon to cut the fork. It's a guide to cut the fork. So we're going to use a hacksaw to cut the fork, and this will go in my vise over here, and that is what we'll use to cut the steer tube down to size. Need a file perhaps, maybe to file down the cut after we get that done, and then a hacksaw. And I got a brand new blade for it here, a 32 tooth blade, brand new blade, so that should cut this steerer tube pretty easily. Of course, we're going to need some grease to put in the bearings and everything, courtesy of WPL. They're absolute bike grease, so that should put everything together pretty slick. And then, of course, handlebars, PNW range bars that are going to go on the bike. So just a note here, last time I did a fork install, I used a pipe cutter to cut the steerer tube down to size. And it did work. It just took an awful lot of effort, and you kind of end up bending the steerer tube a little bit. So I'm thinking a hacksaw will be a lot quicker and a lot easier, especially with the guide. So let's go ahead, we'll put the fork on the bike, get some rough estimates of where we need to cut that steerer tube. Okay, so the best bet when you're doing this is to kind of rough fit the fork onto the bike, and then we'll just mark with a pencil where we want to cut the steerer tube. And we'll get the fork installed. We're just going to go ahead and put the crown race down on there. Like I said, it's nice that it is a split crown race, so we don't have to worry about using a special tool to get that on there. We'll just put all the pieces on there. So that's the bottom bearings. So we'll just get that in there, and then we're just rough fitting this to get an idea of where everything is going to line up. Okay, so with the Roscoe, I was running these two spacers and then the stem, and then I had this one other spacer on the top of the stem. What I think I'm going to do here is run a little bit of a thicker spacer here. If we just zoom in a little bit, I'll show you here. So on the Roscoe, I was running one spacer, like this, one spacer on top of the stem. I think for this case, because I'm not 100% sure how I'm going to or how high I'm going to want this stem, so I'm going to use a little bit thicker spacer here. I'm going to put this one on here. So a little bit thicker spacer, that'll allow me some room to possibly, if I needed to raise up the the headset or raise up the stem, I could do that. So I'm going to do that there. Just going to take a pencil and mark on the steer tube. So now that I've got that marked, this is roughly where I'm going to cut it. I'm going to cut the head or the steer tube just slightly below that line I made on there. So let's go ahead and take this apart and get it set up to be cut. So this is the cutting tool or the cutting guide. Focus on that. The cutting guide, and basically we just install that in a vise like so. There, so that's nice. That'll be nice to cut the fork in. So we got the fork here. We're going to put it through this cutting guide, steer tube through there. There's the line there that we're going to cut. So I just have to kind of eyeball that in there. Like I said, I want to cut it slightly below that line. So get it in there. I'll tighten this down like so. So we're going to go ahead now and cut this. This is the moment of truth here. This is when you want to make sure that your measurement is correct, because once you go take this step, there's no turning back. Pretty confident I have that lined up right. So then the hacksaw just goes down in that channel and lines up perfectly. So we can just go ahead and cut the steer tube off. And there we go. So there we go, we got that cut off. We'll just take this out of there. So I must say, that was a lot easier than using the pipe cutter that I used before. That cut a lot faster. So now we're just gonna go ahead and clean this off here. And I'm just gonna see if this will go over. See, I don't even think we need to file that cut. It cut it a lot smoother than the pipe cutter did. So now we can go ahead and install this star nut down inside the steer tube. So, got this fancy tool here. It basically, you just put the star nut in there and then it just goes on there, and then you can just tap it into place on there. So let's see how this works. I never actually got to use this last time. So the star nut, if you want to see there, focus on this here. It's going to go like so down in there, like that. And we'll just put this on top, and then we'll use a mallet. I have a rubber, I'm just going to grab a little rubber mallet here. So with just a rubber mallet, we're going to go ahead and just tap that star nut into place. Just like so. Take that off, and there is the star nut down inside the fork like it should be. So this tool here, I think I got it off Amazon, super cheap. I think it was like 10 bucks or something. Well worth it, because that made that job way easier than using a screwdriver or trying to do it some other sort of way. Okay, so star nut's in. So basically we can go ahead and put this on the bike now. It's pretty much ready to go. So I should also mention what you're going to need for this is a 4 and a 5 millimeter hex. This will be for the stem, getting it tight, and then for the headset bolt, you'll need the 5 millimeter. So just keep that in mind. You will need this for this job here. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and put everything back together, putting the crown race on, snapping that in place. I am going to put a little bit of grease around there. We'll just keep water out of there. Again, the WPL absolute grease. So we put some grease around the crown race there. Then we're going to put some grease up inside the headset. I will mention that I did get 2 wheels in London to press the headset into place for me, because that's a little bit beyond what I wanted to do or have the tools to do. So I'm just greasing the inside cup here of where the bearing's gonna sit, putting the bearings on the fork. Gonna put some grease around them as well. I find with doing headsets, the more grease the better, because you don't want a creaky headset. So we'll get lots of grease in there around the bearings. Same with the top cup here. Gonna nice grease in there. And you want to hold the fork up. I have it held up here at the bottom by the crown, making sure that I have pressure holding it up. Then we're just going to slide on the little, first things first, we're going to put the bearings in. And you want to make sure, if you can see that there, if it'll focus on it, I'm not sure, but there is a little edge. You want to make sure that goes down and it'll slide right into the headset perfectly. Again, we'll just put a little more grease around here. Then we'll slide this little, I'm not sure what this piece is called, but it's like a little split ring. We'll put that, it kind of wedges in there. Then the top cap, we are just going to make sure to have a little more grease on the top there before we put the headset or the cap on. All right, so that's on there now. Just gonna clean up my hands a little bit here. Okay, so then we're gonna go ahead and put the spacers on. I'm gonna put a big spacer and a little spacer. I'm not exactly sure what size these are, but these were the same that were on the Roscoe. Then we'll put the stem on, like so. So we're gonna put the spacer on the top, and this is where I'm gonna note, hopefully you guys can see on the camera here, they point at it here. This is why you cut the steer tube down a couple millimeters down from the line that you made. So when the spacer goes on, there is a tiny little gap between the top of the spacer and the steer tube, because you want the top cap to sit on top of the spacer, not on the steer tube. So you wouldn't want it to look like this, for example. Like you wouldn't want your steer tube above the spacer, even a little bit. You want to make sure that that spacer has a good millimeter or two above the top of the steer tube. So then we'll go ahead and put the top cap on. Now with this top cap, you don't need to go crazy tight on it. You want to make sure you tighten this before tightening up the stem. So just go ahead and tighten that up. You're holding up the fork by the bottom. And you just want to preload the bearings. So you don't want to crank too tight on this, just nice and snug like that. And then we'll go ahead and tighten up the stem. But we won't go too crazy on these either. We won't torque it down properly until we get the bars in place on there and make sure that they're straight on there. So I'm just gonna go ahead and put the bar on now, just so I can go ahead and make sure everything is straight. I'm also now gonna put the fender on this fork now. It does just come with 3 little bolts. You'll need a 4mm and a 2.5mm. And this just goes on here like so. If you can, I'll zoom in here. Hopefully you can see that. Might be a little bit dark, but there's basically just a hole there and 2 holes there that line up. So we just screw that in there. Just put these other two little ones in here. There. So there's the Fender installed on there. Looks pretty slick in factory. So now that I have this all done, I'm just gonna use some alcohol, just spray it on a rag here and clean up any extra grease here that we have, that we made a mess of here when we installed it. All right, so that's it. Thank you guys for watching the video. Hopefully this helps you guys if you're doing a fork install on a bike. Doing it the second time around for me was a lot better than the first time I did it. Things went pretty smoothly, so hopefully that helps. So hey guys, thanks for subscribing to the channel. Thanks for liking the videos, being part of the community. Really appreciate it. If you haven't subscribed yet, please consider doing so now. Just hit the logo on the bottom corner and subscribe. Greatly appreciate it. We have a few more videos coming up in the future with the Kobain. Going to be finishing building that up. Hopefully going to be ready to ride soon. So stay tuned to the channel, lots more coming. And as always, keep your feet on the pedals.
Oh, shut your face, TOogy HOwser.